The conference room fell silent when I walked through the door. 12 faces turned toward me, some confused, some curious, and 3 in particular frozen in expressions of pure, undiluted horror. I recognized those 3 faces. I'd spent 5 years trying to forget them. Melissa Hartman, Craig Donovan, Jennifer Price. The unholy trinity who had made my life a living hell at this very company, in this very building, 15 years ago. The people who had called me things I still couldn't repeat without my stomach turning. The colleagues who had laughed at my hair, mocked my voice, and made me cry in bathroom stalls during lunch breaks. And now, according to the announcement that had just gone out to all 700 employees of Weston and Associates, I was their new CEO. "Good morning, everyone," I said, setting my portfolio on the table and taking my seat at the head. "I'm Nadine Coleman, and I'm looking forward to working with each of you during this transition." Melissa's face had gone the color of old milk. Craig was staring at his laptop screen like it might offer an escape route. Jennifer kept opening and closing her mouth like a fish pulled from water. I smiled, not with malice, but with something far more powerful. Peace. Because this moment, as satisfying as it was, had never been about revenge. It was about becoming the woman they told me I could never be. Let me take you back to where it all began. Back to the girl I was before I learned what it meant to survive in spaces that weren't designed for me. My name is Nadine Marie Coleman, and I grew up in a yellow house on Cypress Street in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. The house was small, just 3 bedrooms for my parents and 5 children, but it was filled with music and laughter and the smell of my grandmother's gumbo simmering on Sunday afternoons. My father, Bernard Coleman, worked as a maintenance supervisor at the local hospital for 37 years. My mother, Roslyn, was a teaching assistant at the elementary school until her arthritis made it too painful to stand all day. Together, they raised us with a simple philosophy: education is the one thing nobody can take from you. I took that philosophy to heart. I was valedictorian of my high school class, earned a full scholarship to Louisiana State University, and graduated with honors in business administration. My first job out of college was as a junior analyst at a small firm in New Orleans, where I learned the fundamentals of corporate finance while sharing a cramped apartment with 2 roommates. By the time I was 28, I'd earned my MBA from Tulane and caught the attention of headhunters from larger companies. One of them connected me with Weston and Associates, a mid-sized consulting firm based in Charlotte, North Carolina, that was looking to diversify its analyst pool. Diversify, that word should have been my first warning. But I was young and ambitious and so hungry to prove myself that I ignored the subtle implications. I accepted the offer, packed my belongings into a U-Haul, and drove 11 hours to start what I believed would be the next chapter of my success story. I had no idea I was driving straight into a nightmare. Weston and Associates occupied 3 floors of a gleaming office tower in uptown Charlotte. The lobby was all marble and glass, the kind of corporate elegance designed to impress clients and intimidate newcomers. I remember standing there on my first day, clutching my new briefcase, feeling simultaneously terrified and exhilarated. "You must be the new diversity hire," someone said behind me. I turned to find a blonde woman about my age, impeccably dressed in a cream-colored suit that probably cost more than my first month's salary. Her smile was polished, professional, and completely without warmth. "I'm Melissa Hartman. I started in the analyst program last year." She looked me up and down with obvious assessment. "They told us you were coming. It's nice that the company is making an effort to be more inclusive." The emphasis she placed on that last word made her meaning clear. I wasn't a qualified professional who'd earned her position. I was a checkbox, a token, something to make the company look good in its annual report. "I'm Nadine Coleman," I said, extending my hand, "and I'm looking forward to contributing to the team." Melissa shook my hand with the enthusiasm of someone handling something unpleasant. "I'm sure you'll find your place eventually. It can be a lot to adjust to: the pace, the expectations, the culture." She paused meaningfully. Some people from certain backgrounds find it challenging. Before I could respond, she was already walking toward the elevators, leaving me standing alone in that marble lobby, my excitement curdling into something heavier. That was my introduction to Weston and Associates, and it only got worse from there. The analyst bullpen was on the 14th floor, a open-plan space filled with identical cubicles and the constant clatter of keyboards. My desk was in the back corner, positioned so that my computer screen was visible to anyone walking past. A strategic placement, I would later realize. Nothing I did could go unobserved. The first few weeks were a crash course in coded hostility. Nobody was overtly cruel. That would have been too easy to report, too simple to address. Instead, I was subjected to a constant stream of microaggressions so subtle that pointing them out made me seem paranoid. My name was consistently mispronounced, Nadien instead of Nadien, despite multiple corrections. My contributions in meetings were attributed to others or ignored entirely. I was excluded from lunch invitations that seemed to include everyone else. When I did eat in the break room, conversations would stop when I entered. And then there were the comments. "Your hair is so interesting today," Jennifer Price said once, staring at my braids with barely concealed distaste. "Is that a cultural thing?" "You're so articulate," Craig Donovan observed after I presented a quarterly analysis. "I mean, your presentation skills are really impressive for someone with your background." "We were just joking that you probably got this job because of affirmative action," Melissa laughed during a team meeting. "Not that there's anything wrong with that. It's great that companies are giving opportunities to people who might not otherwise qualify." Each comment was delivered with a smile, wrapped in plausible deniability. If I objected, I was being sensitive. If I reported it, I was causing drama. If I stayed silent, I was accepting their narrative. It was a trap designed with no escape. The nickname started about 3 months into my tenure. I never learned who coined it first, Melissa, Craig, or Jennifer, but it spread through the analyst pool like poison in a water supply. They thought I didn't know. They thought they were clever, whispering it in hallways and break rooms, passing it in emails I wasn't copied on but that somehow always found their way to my awareness. Quota Queen. That's what they called me. Quota Queen. As if my MBA, my 4 years of experience, my 12-hour days and flawless performance reviews were irrelevant. As if the only explanation for my presence was some government mandate forcing the company to tolerate me. The first time I heard it directly, I was in a bathroom stall during lunch. I'd started eating there sometimes, just to escape the suffocating silence of the break room. The door opened, and I heard Jennifer's voice. "Did you see her presentation this morning? She actually thinks she's going to get promoted." Melissa's laugh was high and sharp. "Please, they'll keep her around for optics, but she'll never move up. Can you imagine Quota Queen in a client meeting? The partners would die of embarrassment." She tries so hard, though. It's almost sad. It's pathetic. She should just accept that she's here to fill a seat, not actually contribute. They left without washing their hands. I sat in that stall for another 20 minutes, tears streaming silently down my face, my lunch growing cold in my lap. That night, I called my mother. "Baby, come home," she said, her voice thick with pain she was trying to hide. "You don't need this. Come home and find something here." "Mama, if I leave, they win. If I run away every time someone tries to make me feel small, I'll spend my whole life running. There's no shame in walking away from people who don't deserve you." "I know, but there's power in proving them wrong." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "Your grandmother used to say that the fire that melts butter hardens steel. You decide which one you're going to be, Nadine. But whatever you decide, we're here." I chose steel. The project that changed everything came 6 months into my time at Weston. Harrison Technologies, a major client, needed a comprehensive market analysis for a new product launch. It was a high-visibility assignment, the kind that could make or break an analyst's trajectory. When the senior partner assigned the lead role to our team, everyone assumed Craig would take point. He'd been there longest, had the right pedigree, knew how to work the room. But the partner chose me. "Nadine, your analytics work has been exceptional," David Weston himself said in a brief meeting. "I want you heading this up. Craig and Melissa will support." The look on their faces could have curdled fresh milk. For the next 8 weeks, I poured everything I had into that project. I arrived before dawn and left after midnight. I analyzed data until my eyes burned. I built presentations that were sharper, cleaner, more compelling than anything the team had produced before. And Craig and Melissa did everything in their power to sabotage me. Files went missing from shared drives overnight. Data I'd compiled was mysteriously corrupted. Meeting invites arrived in my inbox after the meetings had already ended. When I asked questions, I received incomplete answers or none at all. "Sorry, I thought you already had that information," Craig would say, his expression innocent and his eyes cold. "Miscommunication happens," Melissa would shrug. "Maybe if you were more organized." I documented everything. Every deleted file I had backed up at home. Every missed meeting I noted with timestamps. Every incomplete answer I followed up in writing so there would be a paper trail. They thought they were building my coffin. They didn't realize they were handing me the nails for their own. The Harrison Technologies presentation was scheduled for a Thursday afternoon. The night before, I stayed at the office until 2 a.m., triple-checking every slide, every data point, every transition. When I finally drove home, I felt a cautious optimism I hadn't experienced in months. I should have known better. I arrived at 7 a.m. to run through the presentation one final time. But when I opened my laptop and navigated to the file, my blood turned to ice. It was gone. Not just the presentation, everything. The market analysis, the competitive research, the financial projections, the strategic recommendations. 8 weeks of work vanished without a trace. My backup drive was in my desk drawer. I grabbed it with shaking hands, plugged it in, and nearly collapsed with relief when I saw my files intact. But as I began transferring them back to my laptop, I noticed something strange. The backup wasn't just a copy of my work. It also contained a log of network activity, a security feature I'd installed after too many mysterious file disappearances. Someone had accessed my files at 11:47 p.m., after I'd left. They deleted everything and then attempted to wipe the activity log. The login credentials showed it was Craig Donovan's account. I sat at my desk, staring at that log, and felt something shift inside me. Not anger, I'd moved past anger months ago. Not despair, I'd cried enough tears to fill an ocean. What I felt was clarity. This wasn't just about me. This was about what they thought they could do to people like me. The impunity, the arrogance, the absolute certainty that they would never face consequences. It was time to change that certainty. I didn't confront Craig. I didn't alert Melissa. I didn't give any indication that I knew what had happened. Instead, I restored my files, completed my preparation, and delivered the Harrison Technologies presentation flawlessly. The client was impressed. David Weston was impressed. The project was a success by every measure. And then I requested a private meeting with the senior partners. "I have documentation," I said quietly, sliding a folder across the conference table, "of a systematic pattern of harassment, sabotage, and discrimination that I've experienced since joining this company." The partners exchanged uncomfortable glances. "This is a serious allegation, Nadine," one of them said carefully. "Yes, it is, which is why I've been thorough." I opened the folder. Deleted files with network logs showing unauthorized access, recorded instances of exclusion from team communications, written accounts of discriminatory comments with dates, times, and witnesses, and most recently, evidence that Craig Donovan deliberately deleted my Harrison Technologies presentation the night before a major client meeting. Silence. "I'm not asking for sympathy," I continued. "I'm asking for accountability. What you do with this information will determine what I do next." The implication was clear. I had a lawyer. I had documentation. I had a case that would be very, very embarrassing if it became public. And for the first time since I'd walked into that marble lobby, I had power. The partners deliberated for 3 days. 3 days of walking past Craig's desk, past Melissa's office, past Jennifer's cubicle, pretending I didn't notice the nervous glances, the whispered conversations that stopped when I approached. 3 days of doing my job with the same excellence I'd always brought, even as my future hung in the balance. On the 4th day, I was summoned to David Weston's corner office. He was a man in his 60s, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, with the kind of old money polish that came from generations of privilege. I'd always found him fair, if distant. He'd given me the Harrison Technologies project, after all. He'd recognized my talent when others refused to see it. But fairness and courage aren't the same thing. I was about to learn the difference. "Nadine, please sit down." He gestured to the leather chair across from his mahogany desk. "We've reviewed your documentation. It's thorough." "Thank you." The partners have discussed the situation extensively. We take these matters very seriously. I waited, my hands folded in my lap, my face carefully neutral. Craig Donovan has been formally reprimanded. He'll be on probation for the next 6 months, and any further incidents will result in immediate termination. Reprimanded, probation. I felt something cold settle in my chest. And the others, Melissa Hartman, Jennifer Price. David shifted uncomfortably. "Without more concrete evidence of their involvement in the specific incidents you've documented, we can't take disciplinary action. However, we'll be implementing mandatory sensitivity training for all staff." Sensitivity training, the corporate equivalent of a slap on the wrist. "Mr. Weston, with all due respect, Craig deliberately sabotaged a major client presentation. That's not a sensitivity issue. That's grounds for termination." "I understand your frustration, but Craig has been with the company for 5 years. He has relationships with clients, institutional knowledge, a strong performance record." A strong performance record, built partly on taking credit for my work. David's jaw tightened. "Nadine, we're trying to find a resolution that works for everyone. The company values your contributions. We want you to stay, but we also have to consider the broader implications of holding white employees accountable for discriminating against black ones." The words hung in the air like smoke. David's face reddened. "That's not what I said." "It's what you meant. You're telling me that Craig's relationships and tenure matter more than what he did to me, that maintaining the status quo is more important than justice." I stood, gathering my portfolio. "I appreciate your time, Mr. Weston, but I think we both know this conversation is over. Nadine, please, let's discuss this further." "There's nothing left to discuss. You've made the company's priorities clear." I walked out of his office with my head high and my heart breaking. I gave my notice the following Monday. The partners seemed almost relieved, which told me everything I needed to know about how they'd viewed me from the beginning. Craig didn't bother hiding his smirk. Melissa and Jennifer whispered in corners with barely concealed glee. "I heard she's leaving because she couldn't handle the pressure," Jennifer said loudly enough for me to hear during my final week. "Some people just aren't cut out for this environment." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. I was already focused on what came next. My last day fell on a Friday in late September. I packed my personal belongings into a cardboard box, not unlike the one I'd carried in on my first day, full of hope and ambition. The irony wasn't lost on me. As I waited for the elevator, Melissa appeared beside me. She was smiling, that polished, empty smile I'd come to recognize as a mask for something uglier. "It's really too bad things didn't work out," she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "But I'm sure you'll find something more, suited to your abilities." I turned to face her fully. "Melissa, can I tell you something?" Her smile faltered slightly. "Of course. 15 years from now, you're going to remember this moment. You're going to remember how you treated me, what you called me, what you tried to take from me. And you're going to wish you'd made different choices." The elevator dinged. The doors opened. I stepped inside and pressed the button for the lobby. "Is that a threat?" Melissa asked, her voice suddenly uncertain. "No," I said as the doors began to close. "It's a promise." The years that followed were the hardest and most transformative of my life. I left Charlotte and moved to Atlanta, where the Black professional community was stronger and the opportunities more abundant. I took a position at a smaller consulting firm, less prestigious, lower salary, but with leadership that valued my contributions without qualifiers or asterisks. I worked relentlessly. I built relationships with clients who saw my brilliance before my skin color. I developed a reputation for strategic thinking and flawless execution that spread through industry networks like wildfire. Within 3 years, I was a senior consultant. Within 5, I was a partner. But I didn't stop there. I started speaking at conferences about diversity in corporate leadership. I wrote articles that were published in major business journals. I became a voice for the countless professionals of color who'd experienced what I'd experienced: the isolation, the gaslighting, the constant requirement to be twice as good for half the recognition. My story resonated. It resonated because it wasn't unique. It resonated because so many people saw their own experiences reflected in my words. And slowly, something unexpected began to happen. Headhunters started calling. Boards started reaching out. Companies I'd never approached were approaching me, seeking my expertise, my perspective, my leadership. I was no longer fighting for a seat at the table. I was being invited to tables I didn't even know existed. The call from Weston and Associates came on a Tuesday morning, exactly 12 years after I'd walked out of their Charlotte office. "Ms. Coleman, this is Patricia Andrews, chair of the board for Weston and Associates. I'm reaching out because the board has been following your career with great interest." I almost laughed. The same company that had chosen Craig Donovan's comfort over my dignity was now calling me. "I'm listening," I said carefully. "As you may know, our current CEO is retiring at the end of the year. We're conducting a confidential search for his replacement, and your name has come up repeatedly. Frankly, Ms. Coleman, you're at the top of our list." The silence stretched for several seconds as I processed her words. "Mrs. Andrews, I'm going to be very honest with you. I worked at Weston and Associates early in my career, and my experience there was formative, let's say. I'm not sure returning would be in either of our best interests. I'm aware of your history with the company." Her voice was quiet, serious. "I'm also aware that things have changed. David Weston retired years ago. Several partners from that era have moved on. But more importantly, we've spent the past decade trying to address the cultural issues that drove talented people like you away. Trying isn't the same as succeeding." "No, it isn't. Which is why we need leadership that understands what we did wrong and has the vision to do better." She paused. "Ms. Coleman, we're not asking you to forget what happened. We're asking if you're willing to help us become the company we should have been all along." I didn't give Patricia Andrews an answer that day. I told her I needed time to consider, and she graciously agreed to wait. But the truth was, I already knew what I wanted to do. The question was whether I could live with the consequences. That evening, I sat on my back porch with a glass of wine, watching the Atlanta sunset paint the sky in shades of amber and rose. My husband, Malcolm, found me there an hour later, still staring at the horizon. Malcolm and I had met at a business conference 7 years earlier. He was a corporate attorney specializing in civil rights cases, a man who'd spent his career fighting the same battles I'd lived through. We'd connected instantly, married within 2 years, and built a life together that felt like the reward for everything I'd survived. "You're thinking loud enough to wake the neighbors," he said, settling into the chair beside me. "Want to share?" I told him about the call, about Patricia Andrews, about the opportunity to lead the company that had once tried to break me. Malcolm listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "How do you feel about it?" "Conflicted. Part of me wants to laugh in their faces, tell them they had their chance and they blew it." I swirled the wine in my glass. "But another part of me, Malcolm, do you know how many black women are CEOs of major consulting firms? Not enough. Not enough. And here's a company offering me that chance. A company with 700 employees, offices in 6 cities, revenue in the hundreds of millions. If I say no, they'll find someone else. Probably someone who looks a lot like the people who pushed me out. And if you say yes? If I say yes, I walk back into that building. The same building where I cried in bathroom stalls and ate lunch alone and was called names I still can't repeat, and I sit in the corner office. I become the person they said I could never be. I turn to face him. Is that healing or is that masochism? Malcolm took my hand, his thumb tracing circles on my palm. Baby, only you can answer that. But I'll tell you what I see. I see a woman who's spent 15 years building herself into one of the most respected leaders in this industry. Not to prove anyone wrong, but because excellence is who you are. He squeezed my fingers. If you go back to Weston, you're not going back as the girl they tried to destroy. You're going back as the woman they couldn't break. There's a difference. What if they're still there? Melissa, Craig, Jennifer. Then they're about to meet their new boss. Malcolm smiled. And personally, I'd pay good money to see their faces. I called my mother the next morning. She was 82 now, still living in the yellow house on Cypress Street, still sharp as a tack despite the years. When I told her about the opportunity, she was quiet for so long I thought we'd been disconnected. Mama, are you there? I'm here, baby, just thinking. About what? About the night you called me from that bathroom, crying so hard you couldn't catch your breath. About how I begged you to come home and you said no, you wouldn't let them win. My throat tightened. I remember. You were so brave, Nadine, so determined. I was proud of you, but I was also terrified. I knew what that kind of fighting could cost a person. It cost me a lot, Mama, but it gave me a lot too. I know it did. And now here they are, coming back to you with their hats in their hands, asking for what they should have recognized from the beginning. She laughed softly. The Lord works in mysterious ways, doesn't he? So you think I should do it? I think you should do whatever brings you peace. But Nadine, her voice grew serious. If you go back there, you go back with your eyes open. Those people who hurt you, some of them might still be there. The culture that allowed that hurt, it might still have roots. You can't change everything overnight, and trying might break your heart all over again. I know. But I also know my daughter. You've never been one to run from hard things. And if anyone can walk into that building and make it better, it's you. I felt tears prick at my eyes. I love you, Mama. I love you too, baby. Now go show them what a real leader looks like. I flew to Charlotte the following week for a series of meetings with the board. The city had changed in the years since I'd left. More buildings, more traffic, more of the polish that comes with rapid growth. But as my car approached the familiar office tower, I felt time collapse. Suddenly I was 28 again, clutching my briefcase, full of hope and terror in equal measure. The lobby was the same. Marble floors, soaring windows, that overwhelming sense of corporate grandeur. But this time, I wasn't a nervous newcomer hopping to prove herself. I was a candidate for the highest position in the company, and everyone in that building knew it. Patricia Andrews met me personally, escorting me to a conference room where the full board waited. They were a diverse group, more diverse than any leadership team Weston had assembled in its history, and they greeted me with genuine respect. The conversations that followed were extensive and probing. They asked about my leadership philosophy, my strategic vision, my plans for growth and innovation. They asked about challenges I'd faced and how I'd overcome them. And then Patricia asked the question I'd been waiting for. Nadine, we're aware that your previous experience at this company was difficult. Some might say we have no right to ask you back after what happened. Why would you even consider this position? I looked around the table at faces that were watching me intently. Because 15 years ago, I walked out of this building believing that places like this would never change. That companies built on exclusion would always find ways to push out anyone who didn't fit their narrow definition of belonging. I paused. I'm here because I want to know if I was wrong. And if you discover you were right, If the culture is still toxic under the surface, then I'll either fix it or I'll expose it. But I won't pretend. And I won't protect anyone who thinks the old ways are acceptable. I met Patricia's eyes directly. If you're looking for someone to maintain the status quo, I'm not your candidate. But if you're genuinely committed to transformation, the hard, uncomfortable, painful work of becoming better, then I'm ready to lead that journey. The board members exchanged glances. Patricia smiled. That's exactly what we were hoping to hear. 3 weeks later, the announcement went out to all 700 employees. Weston and Associates had a new CEO. Her name was Nadine Coleman, and she was coming home. My first day, as CEO, was deliberately quiet. No fanfare, no all-hands meetings, no grand pronouncements. I arrived at 7 a.m. before most employees and took the private elevator to the executive floor. The corner office that awaited me was vast and sunlit, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Charlotte skyline. I stood at those windows for a long time, remembering the girl who'd eaten lunch in bathroom stalls because the break room felt too hostile. Remembering the analyst whose files were deleted the night before a major presentation. Remembering the woman who'd walked out of this building with a cardboard box and a broken heart. She was still part of me. She would always be part of me, but she wasn't all of me, not anymore. My executive assistant, a young black woman named Destiny Williams, knocked softly on the open door. Ms. Coleman, your 9 a.m. is here. The senior leadership team is assembled in conference room A. Thank you, Destiny. I'll be right there. I straightened my jacket, a deep burgundy blazer I'd chosen deliberately, a color of power and warmth, and walked toward my first test. The senior leadership team consisted of 12 people, division heads, chief officers, regional directors. They'd been running Weston in the interim period between CEOs, and they were understandably curious about the woman the board had chosen over internal candidates. I recognized two faces immediately. Craig Donovan, now Senior Vice President of Client Relations, sat at the far end of the table. The years had added gray to his temples and weight to his frame, but those cold eyes were exactly as I remembered. He'd survived, even thrived, despite the reprimand that was supposed to change his behavior. And Melissa Hartman, now Executive Vice President of Strategic Partnerships, occupied a seat near the middle. She'd risen high, higher than I would have expected for someone with more ambition than ability. But that's how it often worked in places like this. The right connections mattered more than the right contributions. Jennifer Price, I would later learn, had left the company years ago. Small mercies. Good morning, everyone, I said, taking my place at the head of the table. I'm Nadine Coleman, and I'm honored to lead Weston and Associates into its next chapter. The responses were polite, measured, professional. Craig and Melissa said nothing, their faces carefully blank. I know some of you are wondering about my vision for the company, what changes I'll make, whose jobs are safe. I paused, letting the tension build. I believe in transparency, so let me be direct. I'm not here to burn anything down. I'm here to build something better. A few shoulders relaxed. A few others remained rigid. That said, I'll be conducting a comprehensive review of our operations, culture, and personnel over the next 90 days. Everything will be evaluated. Everything will be on the table. And when I say everything, I mean everything. I looked directly at Craig as I spoke that final word. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Any questions? Melissa raised her hand with exaggerated politeness. Ms. Coleman, I think I speak for everyone when I say we're excited about your leadership. But I'm curious, given your extensive experience elsewhere, how familiar are you with Weston's current operations and client base? I'd hate for there to be a learning curve that impacts our Q4 performance. The implication was clear. I was an outsider. I didn't know how things worked here. I might damage what they'd built. That's a thoughtful question, Melissa. I smiled warmly. You're right that I've spent the past 15 years building expertise elsewhere, but I'm not entirely unfamiliar with Weston. In fact, I started my career here, left about 15 years ago to pursue other opportunities. I watched her face as the realization landed. The confusion, the dawning recognition, the poorly concealed horror. "You may not remember me," I continued pleasantly. "I was just a junior analyst back then, but I remember this company very well, and I'm looking forward to seeing how much it's grown." The room was absolutely silent. "Any other questions? No, then let's get to work." Word spread through the building like wildfire. By lunchtime, everyone knew. The new CEO wasn't just an accomplished outsider. She was a former employee who'd left under mysterious circumstances 15 years ago. The whispers were everywhere, filling conference rooms and break rooms with speculation. What happened to her back then? Why did she leave? What does she know? I let them wonder. Information is power, and I had no intention of showing my full hand before I understood the current landscape. Over the following weeks, I met with every department, every team, every level of the organization. I asked questions about workflows and pain points and ideas for improvement. I listened more than I spoke. I took copious notes. And I paid attention to the patterns. Who was respected? Who was feared? Which managers had high turnover and which had loyal teams? Where were the women and people of color clustered, and where were they conspicuously absent? The picture that emerged was troubling but not surprising. Weston had made surface-level diversity improvements, more faces of color in the lobby photos, more inclusive language in the mission statement, but the deeper culture remained largely unchanged. The senior leadership was still predominantly white and male. Promotions still favored those with the right pedigree and connections. Employees of color were concentrated in lower-level positions with limited advancement opportunities. And in quiet conversations behind closed doors, people told me stories that sounded painfully familiar. "My manager takes credit for my ideas in meetings," a young Latina analyst confided. "When I complained to HR, they said I should be more collaborative." "I've been passed over for promotion 3 times," a black senior associate told me. "Each time, the job went to someone with less experience who happened to golf with the partners." "There's a boys' club mentality that never really went away," a white female director admitted. "Those of us who have survived have learned to work around it, but we shouldn't have to." 15 years. 15 years, and the same poison still flowed through these halls. The only difference was that, now, I had the power to do something about it. The first major decision I made as CEO came at the end of my 90-day review. I called an all-hands meeting in the main auditorium, all 700 employees, either in person or via video conference for the satellite offices. The energy in the room was electric, anxious, uncertain. They knew something big was coming. They just didn't know what. I stood at the podium, looking out at the sea of faces, some hopeful, some fearful, some carefully neutral, waiting to see which way the wind would blow. "Thank you all for being here," I began. "Over the past 3 months, I've had the privilege of meeting with many of you personally. I've learned about your work, your challenges, your ideas for making this company better, and I've listened." I clicked the remote and a slide appeared behind me, a single word. Accountability. This is the theme of everything I'm about to share. Accountability, not punishment, not revenge. Accountability, the principle that our actions have consequences and that those consequences should be fair, consistent, and transparent. I saw Craig shift in his seat near the back of the auditorium. Melissa, seated closer to the front, had gone very still. Weston and Associates has a proud history, but it also has a troubled one. For too long, this company has tolerated behaviors and systems that undermine our stated values. We've talked about diversity while promoting homogeneity. We've preached inclusion while protecting exclusion. We've claimed to value all employees while allowing some to be treated as less than. The silence was absolute. That ends today. I clicked to the next slide, which outlined a comprehensive restructuring of the company's policies and leadership. Effective immediately, we are implementing the following changes. First, a complete overhaul of our promotion and compensation systems. All advancement decisions will now require documentation of objective criteria and will be reviewed by a newly created equity committee to ensure consistency and fairness. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Second, we are establishing an independent ombudsman office to handle complaints of harassment, discrimination, and retaliation. This office will report directly to the board, not to me or any other executive, ensuring that employees can raise concerns without fear of reprisal. More murmurs, louder now. Third, we are requiring all managers and senior leaders to undergo comprehensive training on inclusive leadership. Not the checkbox sensitivity training of the past, but genuine, immersive work designed to surface blind spots and build new skills. I paused, scanning the room. And fourth, we are making changes to the senior leadership team. The auditorium went dead silent. Over the past 90 days, my review has revealed patterns of behavior among certain leaders that are inconsistent with the values we claim to uphold. I have documentation of credit-taking, of exclusion, of comments and actions that created hostile environments for employees of color and women. I saw Craig's face drain of color. Melissa gripped the armrests of her chair. Effective today, 3 members of our senior leadership team are being placed on administrative leave pending a formal investigation into their conduct. If the investigation confirms what the evidence suggests, their employment will be terminated. I didn't name names. I didn't need to. The empty seats at the next leadership meeting would speak for themselves. I want to be clear about something. These decisions are not about settling old scores or pursuing personal vendettas. They are about establishing a new standard. A standard that says your position does not protect you from consequences. Your tenure does not excuse mistreatment. Your relationships do not place you above accountability. I looked directly at the section where Craig and Melissa sat, though I addressed the room at large. Some of you may be uncomfortable with these changes. Some of you may feel threatened. Some of you may decide that the new Weston and Associates is not a place you want to work. I paused. That's okay. I wish you well in your future endeavors. A few nervous laughs scattered through the auditorium. But for those of you who are ready to build something better, something we can all be proud of, I'm asking for your partnership. Change is hard. It's messy. It's uncomfortable. But it's also necessary. And I believe this company, these people, are worth the effort. I stepped back from the podium. Thank you. My door is always open. The aftermath was chaotic. Craig Donovan was one of the 3 leaders placed on administrative leave. The investigation confirmed what I'd suspected, a pattern of undermining colleagues of color, taking credit for others' work, and creating environments of fear and exclusion. His employment was terminated within the month. Melissa Hartman resigned before the investigation into her conduct was complete. Her resignation letter cited personal reasons and new opportunities, but everyone knew the truth. She'd seen the writing on the wall and decided to leave before she was pushed. The departures sent shockwaves through the industry. Business publications ran stories about the culture revolution at Weston and Associates. Some praised my leadership. Others questioned whether I was being too aggressive, too disruptive, too focused on social issues at the expense of business performance. I ignored the critics and focused on the work. We recruited new leaders who reflected the diversity of our client base. We promoted internal candidates who'd been overlooked for years despite stellar performance. We created mentorship programs, sponsorship initiatives, and development opportunities designed to build a pipeline of diverse talent. And slowly, measurably, things began to change. Employee satisfaction scores rose, turnover rates fell, client feedback improved. Revenue grew not despite our cultural changes, but because of them. It turned out that when people feel valued and respected, they do better work. Who knew? 1 year into my tenure, I received a letter. It was handwritten, which was unusual enough to catch my attention. The return address was a small town in South Carolina. Dear Ms. Coleman, you don't know me, but I know you. My name is Angela Morrison, and I worked at Weston and Associates from 2008 to 2012. I was an analyst in the Charlotte office, one of only 3 Black women in my cohort. I left because I couldn't take it anymore. The isolation, the comments, the nickname they gave me behind my back. They called me Affirmative Action Angela. I found out because someone accidentally copied me on an email chain where they were joking about it. When I heard about the changes you're making at Weston, I cried. Not sad tears, happy ones, because someone finally did what needed to be done. Someone finally stood up and said, no more. I don't know if you faced similar treatment during your time there, but if you did, I want you to know that what you're doing matters. Not just for the people there now, but for everyone who came before. Everyone who left with broken spirits and crushed dreams. Thank you for being the leader we needed. Thank you for not forgetting. With gratitude, Angela Morrison. I held that letter for a long time, tears streaming down my face. This was why I came back. This was why the fight mattered. Not for revenge, for redemption, for every Angela who'd walked away, for every person who'd been told they didn't belong. For myself. 3 years into my tenure as CEO, Weston and Associates was unrecognizable. Not the building, that marble lobby still gleamed with the same corporate grandeur. Not the logo, we'd kept the classic design that clients associated with reliability and excellence. What had transformed was the soul of the place. The senior leadership team was now 50% women and 40% people of color. Our employee resource groups had grown from 2 neglected committees to 7 thriving communities. Our diversity recruitment initiatives had tripled the pipeline of underrepresented candidates. And our reputation had shifted from old guard consulting firm to industry leader in inclusive excellence. But the metric I was most proud of couldn't be captured in any annual report. It was the young Black woman I'd seen laughing freely in the break room during lunch, something I'd never felt comfortable doing in my time as an analyst. It was the Latino manager who told me he finally felt safe bringing his whole self to work. It was the email I received from a white male director who admitted that the leadership training had opened his eyes to behaviors he'd never recognized as harmful. I thought I was one of the good ones, he wrote. I'm learning that good isn't a destination, it's a daily practice. Change was happening. Real, measurable, meaningful change. But I knew better than to think the work was done. The invitation came on an ordinary Tuesday morning. The National Business Leadership Forum, the most prestigious gathering of corporate executives in the country, wanted me to deliver the keynote address at their annual conference. The theme was transformational leadership in the 21st century, and they believed my story embodied that transformation. You've become something of a legend, you know, Patricia Andrews told me over lunch. She'd remained on the board and become a trusted advisor. The CEO who returned to the company that wronged her and turned it into a model of inclusive excellence. People want to hear how you did it. I didn't do it alone. The board took a risk on me. The employees did the hard work. I just pointed in a direction. Don't diminish your role, Nadine. Leaders set the tone. You set a tone that made all the rest possible. I considered her words carefully. If I do this keynote, I want to tell the real story, not a sanitized version about overcoming challenges. The real story, what happened to me here, why I left, what it took to come back. Patricia nodded slowly. The board discussed that possibility when we hired you. We knew your story might become public eventually. We decided that transparency, however uncomfortable, was preferable to having it come out in ways we couldn't control. And now, I think the company is strong enough to handle the truth. More than that, I think the truth is part of what makes us strong. The conference was held in Chicago, 3,000 attendees filling a cavernous convention center. Business leaders, executives, entrepreneurs, and rising stars from every industry imaginable. As I stood backstage, waiting for my introduction, I felt the familiar flutter of nerves, not stage fright, but something deeper. I was about to tell my story to more people than I'd ever imagined. I was about to make myself vulnerable in a way that couldn't be taken back. Malcolm had flown in to be in the audience. My mother, now 85 and using a walker, had insisted on making the trip despite my protests. My daughter. Yes, I had a daughter now, a beautiful 4-year-old named Joy who was staying with Malcolm's parents, would one day watch a recording of this moment. I was doing this for all of them, and for the girl I used to be. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the CEO of Weston and Associates, Nadine Coleman. I walked onto that stage with my head high and my heart pounding. Thank you for that generous introduction, I began, looking out at the sea of faces. But I want to start by telling you a different story than the one you might be expecting. Not the story of my success, but the story of my survival. The room grew very quiet. 20 years ago, I was a young Black woman starting my career at a prestigious consulting firm. I was valedictorian of my high school. I'd earned my MBA from a top program. I was smart, ambitious, and ready to prove myself. I paused, letting the memory settle around me like a familiar garment. Within 3 months of starting that job, I had a nickname. My colleagues called me Quota Queen. They whispered it in hallways, wrote it in emails, laughed about it in break rooms. They never said it to my face. They were too smart for that, but they made sure I knew. Murmurs rippled through the audience. They deleted my files the night before major presentations. They excluded me from meetings and then criticized me for being out of the loop. They took credit for my ideas and then questioned whether I was leadership material. And when I finally documented everything and brought it to the partners, do you know what happened? I looked around the room, meeting eyes with strangers who were leaning forward in their seats. The man who'd sabotaged my work received a reprimand and a probation. The women who'd called me names faced no consequences at all. The partners thanked me for my professionalism and hoped I would move forward constructively. I let the silence stretch. I didn't move forward. I moved out. I packed my cardboard box, walked through that marble lobby one last time, and swore I would never return. That company was Weston and Associates, and 3 years ago I became its CEO. The audience erupted, applause, gasps, whispers of astonishment. I waited for the noise to subside. Now, some of you might be expecting this to be a revenge story. The triumphant return, the tables turned, the enemies vanquished. And I won't lie, there was a moment, walking into that first leadership meeting and seeing the faces of people who'd tormented me, when I felt something close to satisfaction. I smiled slightly. But satisfaction isn't the same as purpose, and revenge isn't the same as justice. I didn't go back to Weston to punish the people who'd hurt me. I went back to build the company they should have created in the first place. A company where talent matters more than pedigree, where inclusion isn't a checkbox but a competitive advantage, where every employee, regardless of race, gender, background, or identity, has the opportunity to thrive. I clicked to my first slide, a photo of the new Weston leadership team, diverse faces smiling in front of that familiar marble lobby. This is what transformation looks like. Not one person's journey from victim to victor, but a collective commitment to being better than we were. The people who called me Quota Queen are gone now. Some were terminated. Some resigned. Some, I'm told, have changed and grown in the years since. I paused. I hope that's true, because the goal was never to destroy them. The goal was to create a world where what they did to me becomes unthinkable, impossible, ancient history. I looked directly into the camera that was broadcasting to overflow rooms. We're not there yet. Not at Weston, not in corporate America, not in this country. But we're closer than we were. And if my story proves anything, it's that change is possible, even in places that seem irredeemable. The standing ovation lasted nearly 4 minutes. I stood at that podium, watching 3,000 people rise to their feet, and felt something I'd spent 20 years searching for. Completion. Not the completion of my journey. That would continue for as long as I drew breath. But the completion of a circle that began in a bathroom stall in Charlotte, where a young Black woman cried into her cold lunch and wondered if she would ever be enough. She was enough. She had always been enough. It just took the world a long time to recognize it. After the keynote, the reception was overwhelming. Business cards pressed into my hands. Invitations to speak, to consult, to advise. Young professionals of color who waited in line just to tell me that my story had given them hope. But the encounter that stayed with me happened in a quiet corner, away from the crowds. A woman approached hesitantly, white, mid-50s, professionally dressed but visibly nervous. Something about her face seemed familiar, though I couldn't immediately place it. "Ms. Coleman, I don't know if you remember me." I studied her features, searching my memory. "I'm Jennifer Price. I worked with you at Weston, a long time ago." The name hit me like a physical force. Jennifer, the third member of the unholy trinity, the one who'd laughed about my hair and whispered in break rooms and helped make my life unbearable. My body tensed instinctively, 20 years of pain rising to the surface. "I remember," I said carefully. Jennifer's eyes filled with tears. "I watched your speech, the whole thing, and her voice broke. "I am so sorry, Nadine, for everything. For what I said, what I did, what I allowed to happen. There's no excuse. I was cruel and I was wrong, and I've carried the shame of it for years." I said nothing, waiting. When you left, I told myself it wasn't my fault, that I was just going along with Melissa and Craig, that I didn't really do anything that bad. She shook her head. "But I did. I participated. I laughed. I made you feel like you didn't belong. And I knew it was wrong even then. I just didn't have the courage to stop." "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I needed you to know that I heard you. Not just the success story, the pain, the cost, what we took from you." She wiped her eyes. "I can't give those years back. I can't undo what happened. But I can tell you that you were right that day in the elevator. I do remember. I've remembered every single day, and I've tried to be different, to raise my children differently, to speak up when I see what we did to you happening to someone else." I studied her face, older now, lined with age and what appeared to be genuine remorse. The Jennifer I remembered had been polished and cruel, armored in privilege and indifference. This woman seemed stripped of that armor, raw and vulnerable. "I forgive you," I said quietly. Jennifer's eyes widened. "You do?" "I do, not because what you did was acceptable. It wasn't, but because holding on to that anger was hurting me more than it was hurting you." I paused. "Forgiveness isn't about saying the past was okay. It's about refusing to let the past control my present." Jennifer nodded, tears streaming freely now. "Thank you. I don't deserve it, but thank you." "You're right, you don't deserve it." I allowed myself a small smile. "But I'm giving it anyway. That's my choice. What you do with it is yours." She reached out as if to embrace me, then stopped herself, uncertain. "Go," I said gently. "Go and be better. That's all any of us can do." 5 years have passed since that conference. I'm still CEO of Weston and Associates, though I've begun transitioning leadership to my successor, a brilliant Black woman named Destiny Williams who started as my executive assistant and rose through the ranks on pure merit and determination. She'll take the helm next year. And I'll move into a chairman role, mentoring the next generation while building the foundation I've dreamed of for years. The Nadine Coleman Foundation for Workplace Equity launched last spring. We provide legal resources, career counseling, and community support for professionals of color facing discrimination. In our first year, we've helped over 200 individuals navigate hostile work environments. Some stayed and fought, some left and thrived elsewhere. All were reminded that they weren't alone. My mother passed away last winter, peacefully in her sleep, surrounded by family. At her funeral, I told stories about the yellow house on Cypress Street, about gumbo Sundays and front porch summers, about a woman who raised 5 children on limited means and unlimited love. I told them about the night she advised me to decide whether I was butter or steel. "I chose steel, Mama," I whispered at her graveside. "Because of you, I chose steel." My daughter Joy is 9 now, fierce and curious and completely unafraid of speaking her mind. She knows a simplified version of my story, that Mommy faced mean people at work but didn't give up. Someday, when she's older, I'll tell her everything. And I'll tell her this: the names they call you are not your destiny. The boxes they try to put you in are not your home. The limitations they place on your potential are not your truth. You are defined by what you choose to become, not by what others choose to see. As I sit here now, in the corner office I never imagined I'd occupy, I sometimes think about that girl in the bathroom stall. The one who ate lunch alone because the break room felt like enemy territory. The one who cried so hard she couldn't breathe. The one who wondered if maybe they were right. Maybe she really was just a quota, a checkbox, a token. I wish I could go back and tell her what I know now. That her pain was valid, but it wasn't permanent. That her tears were understandable, but they wouldn't be her ending. That the very people who tried to break her would one day answer to her, not because she sought revenge, but because she refused to let their cruelty define her ceiling. They called her names. They questioned her qualifications. They deleted her work, excluded her from meetings, made her feel invisible and worthless and small. And now she's their boss. Not because the world suddenly became fair, not because justice always prevails, but because she chose to keep going. She chose to document, to build, to grow, to transform her wounds into wisdom and her pain into power. If you're watching this and you recognize yourself in my story, if you've been called names, pushed out, made to feel like you don't belong, I need you to hear me. You are not what they called you. You are not the limitations they placed on you. You are not the small box they tried to force you into. You are possibility. You are potential. You are power they haven't even begun to understand. So I ask you, what names have they called you? What boxes have they tried to trap you in? And what are you going to build from the ruins of their underestimation? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. Because your story matters, maybe not to the people who tried to silence you, but to someone out there who needs to know they're not alone. If this story moved you, please subscribe to this channel. Hit the notification bell. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Because stories like ours, stories of survival, of transformation, of quiet revolutions in corner offices, they need to spread. They need to reach the young woman crying in a bathroom stall right now, wondering if she'll ever be enough. She is, she always was. And so are you. Until next time, this is Auntie Me reminding you. They can call you names. They can question your worth. They can try to write your story for you. But they can never, ever tell you how it ends. Stay strong, stay faithful, and never stop rising. The end.